Hello and welcome to Mahou Showtime, new podcast thingy here with me. I am Aska. I would say what my Twitter is, but I'm probably changing it again before this is uploaded, so it will be on the screen or somewhere. And with me is my wonderful co-host. It's Barty. Say hello.
Also known as Yusha Gemgia on Twitter. And I was going to say that, Nobu!
Nobu! Yeah, we sit together here because we wanted to talk about magical girls.
Yes.
Of all kind, because magical girls are good.
Magical girls are the best, and anyone who tells you otherwise, you banish to, I wasn't gonna say the Shadow Realm. I was trying to think of, a good place for them for all the bad guys to go. Yeah. Damn, I need to see more Precure, but we'll get to that, ladies and gentlemen, yes. And ladies.
Exactly. So today we want to just talk a bit about ourselves, about what kind of magical girl shows we know and love. So we have like a basis for future conversations, and then we also have a topic to talk about, which is probably Barty's favorite magical girl show, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah.
It sounds like it.
It is.
Okay.
I'd say it is.
And I recently watched season 1. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Yuuki Yuuna later. But first, who are we? I'm Oscar, as I said. I am a very big fan of Precure. Very big fan of Precure. I've not seen everything. I've seen like half of them. Namely, I've seen in order of release Yes 5, Fresh, Heart Catch, Smile, Go Princess, Mahou Girls, Kira Kira a la Mode, and Hugtto. And I'm like watching all the other ones.
Wow.
It was hard to like remember all of them, but you know,
How long did that take?
I started in early 2017. I didn't watch much at the beginning. Like I think I watched maybe 10 episodes of Heart Catch in like half a year, and then I started going through.
Gotcha. Yeah, my experience with Precure. Well, here's the thing, if I may. So I've probably known about the franchise since I want to say either 2012 or 2013. I had a friend who would basically always post about the franchise. He just posts clips of it like on his Facebook like all the time. It was clips, it was screenshots of Magica and Honoka from the first series with Tariwa. Or he just would talk about it constantly. So around 2013, I really, really wanted to watch Doki Doki, but then I saw how long it was, and I saw how bad I was with actually keeping up with long-running shows, except Sailor Moon, which I finished the 3rd season of that summer. And I was like, I don't know if I can do it. So I put it off. The other Precures I found out a little bit about from the same friend and from other blogs I followed. And then it finally got to the point where in 2017, Kira Kira was airing and everyone really liked it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try watching this one. And then I didn't do that either. So finally, Hugtto came around, and this was the one that just absolutely everyone was talking about, which I found kind of weird because I always was told and I always got the impression that the most popular ones were Heart Catch and the original, and even Smile for some people, and also Go Princess, which also appealed to me back in the day. But again, I didn't get around to watching it. But with Hugtto, I decided to join the group watches that Asuka tried to host, and I got I wasn't able to attend for all of them, but I got in 11 or so episodes. And I was before that I almost forgot. Actually, before those group watches, what I actually did was that I sampled with my friend Stone at the time. I sampled basically every single pilot that was out of each Precure series. And we decided to pick based on that, what shows we really wanted to watch at that time. And I gotta be honest, most of the pilots, I don't know if they spoke for the quality of each series, but, with the exception of the sequels, which we didn't get to, Yes 5 Go Go and Max Heart. Most of the pilots actually I thought were pretty damn solid. I don't know if they speak for the quality of the show overall, but me and Stone were like quite pleased with most of them. And it actually became kind of hard to narrow down which show we actually wanted to watch. So we decided we would just go with Hugtto while it was airing, and because everyone was talking about it. And and then Asuka invited me to their group watches, and we did Hugtto, we did Heart Catch, we did Smile, and then I think there was one other, but I'm forgetting now which one it was.
There was a Gopri and a Futari Wa.
Yeah, but I don't think I really managed to attend those.
The only ones we actually finished were Smile and Hugtto.
Yeah, so I didn't get to it. I attended a few of those streams, but ultimately the one that I ended up seeing the most of was Hugtto, and even then I stopped at around episode 11. The other Precures I've seen, definitely not much to like talk about the show as a whole, but I've definitely seen either at least the pilot or at least like a handful of episodes, with the maximum being at this point is definitely Hugtto. And then as of last year, I've seen 12 episodes of Star Twinkle. And I think out of all the ones that I want to watch, like at this current moment, Star Twinkle was the one I'm going to finish first, because that was one that kind of got, a lot of people were like not sure if it was going to live up to the hype that Hugtto had. But I saw a lot of people actually really, really enjoying it last year. And I felt like I missed out not watching it weekly like I said I was going to. So I'm actually pretty determined to finish that one. And the newest one, well, I'm pretty interested in Healing Good overall. I've heard it's quite solid so far. But, that's mostly for, my goddess, Aoi Yuuki, the greatest seiyuu of all, and I'm totally not biased. At least she voiced two of the greatest magical girls ever. But it's nice to see her finally become a Precure, because I know because that's been a lifelong dream for me, by a certain definition of lifelong, but also, one of my friends was like, oh, they keep robbing Aoichi of these roles of a Precure lead.
Yeah.
What the heck is that? Give Aoi Yuki the freaking Precure lead. And it finally happened. So I guess the Toei marketing gods decided, let's bring the ultimate hot-blooded goddess of Genki into this and just, really just make a whole slew of Precure fans. And of course, sell more merchandise.
Yes.
Generally speaking, I have a good impression of the franchise, and I definitely want to watch as much of it as possible until I get burnt out. I have been watching a lot of Magical Girl series that, for me, they set a nice balance of action and sort of casual, like slice of life. There's a lot of downtime in these narratives, and there's not really like a lot of pressure on the characters to actually do things unless they absolutely need to get back to the plot. And then there are sometimes these shows that just don't have any time for that, and they can be just like a whirlwind of emotions. And I have certain feelings about those that we can discuss here, but for the most part, I would say I'm not really that picky with the Magical Girl shows I've watched. And I don't really want to get into semantics too much about what classifies them as magical girls. That's definitely something that Asuka and I can discuss. But yeah, that's basically just me piggybacking off of their experience with the franchise, and just giving my own first impressions.
I've got a lot of feelings about Precure as well, but mine will be kept for like in depth. I think I have so much to say about Precure that this will have I'm working on a guide to people's first Precure and stuff, and that will all be a topic for some other time. Other things I have seen, like I looked through my lists before this just to check again if I was forgetting anything. I have not seen a single Magical Girl show from before the 21st century. I have not seen Doremi. I have not seen Sailor Moon.
That's funny, because I saw you at one point you said that you actually watched a handful of episodes of Doremi.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen 10 episodes of Doremi. I've seen an episode of Sailor Moon, but that doesn't count for me as having seen the show. Like,
yeah, Doremi is a very fun, wholesome franchise. It's kind of what I wanted from magical girl series nowadays, because something about like those, neketsu action, hot-blooded action scenes, I do love them. I do love the Sakuga, and I do love when they piggyback off of the slice of life. But one thing I just couldn't help but notice is that when I was watching Hugtto, one of my problems with it was the fact that some episodes I just didn't want to fight at all. I just didn't want to see the girls fight. I just wanted them to like kind of solve the mundane issue that they were dealing with and having these interpersonal dynamics. And I wanted to see these characters, really grow from that and have to like solve these problems without necessarily having to use magic. Like, or even if they do, it's not for fighting. And I have been watching a lot of Doremi. I've been trying to do certain sessions of it with my friend Ryan Mack on Twitter, who Asuka also knows. They're a big fan of Doremi, and they basically got me deeper into the franchise. Although my friend Chase, or Cap on Twitter, also known as the Radical, but don't tell anyone. He's also really into Doremi lately, and in general, a lot of the anime community on Twitter just seems to really love the show.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got into it, because I'm still only early on in season 1 myself, but I really enjoy it. I think there's a really nice balance of comedy and drama, and it's just a very wholesome, like, feel-good show so far. I know it gets into some very heavy territory, because what else is to be expected of the Toei Kings, Sato Junichi and Igarashi Takuya, who worked, above, under, and even, next to Ikuhara Kunihiko, of all people. Like, of course, it's just, you're not gonna get like just a show that's like wholesome and low stakes the whole time. But right now, Doremi is that, so I'm excited that it is that. I'm excited for when it stops being that, because that's what I feel about a lot of my favorite shows, is when they start out with low stakes, I get more invested in the characters and I just get a feel for the world. And when it starts out with the high stakes, and when it goes up and it continues and starts building those stakes, that's when my emotions start going haywire. And I really enjoy the feeling of my emotions going haywire. And I think magical girls might actually be my favorite medium for that kind of thing right now. My favorite genre for that kind of thing. Yeah. And I was actually surprised that you're not counting it as having watched, because you said you had watched a few episodes, which I think is enough, but I guess you just don't think you've seen a substantial amount.
I mean, I've seen 10 episodes, which, barely gets into any, like, it doesn't get into any heavier stuff. I think there's one episode about the blue girl, Ako, is that her name? I feel it isn't.
Aiko. There was this one episode, Hazuki, I think it was the last one I watched, 11 or 12, where there was there's this girl who just basically, she woke up every morning and she cleaned the classroom and she watered the flowers, and Hazuki tried to make friends with her, and she was really proud of her job, but also the girl kept saying, oh, my mom just wanted me to do it because I'm not very good at like anything else. And then this one guy who actually had a crush on her, this stupid little boy, he's like, oh, you're a teacher's pet. And she's so upset by this that Hazuki was like, oh, she's gonna stop watering the flowers and coming to class early. And so Hazuki really just tried to like help her out. And it was a very sweet episode, and it was a very mature episode. There's another one before that I really, really liked. It was the one. It was the one where Aiko befriended this girl who kind of likes to tell lies and wears a perma smug on her face. My daughter Nobuko, and basically she tells a lot of lies and she tries to get close to people and make them impressed by her. And what happens is she touches on a sore spot with Aiko in mentioning that her father's dead, who died in like some war or in like Vietnam or something like that, although that would not be the appropriate time period. But anyway, it was some kind of little lie like that Aiko took to heart because Aiko's parents were divorced, not too long before the show started, or maybe a little longer, I guess as a person who has also grown up with parents who have been separated for most of her life, I can't really relate to the feelings that she has, but I understand how difficult it is for some kids when their parents are separated, especially when they can't see one of them easily while living with the other very often. So Aiko really didn't like when Nobuko told that lie to just try and sympathize with her. And so that was a little situation that they had to resolve. And the way they resolved it was really nice, actually. Aiko basically dressed up as basically transformed with her magic into this guy from Nobuko's stories who she had like a major crush on, like this detective dude. And basically, told her to just go make up with Aiko and say that she lied and say that she was wrong. And so they do make up, and they're overall they're just kids, but they're dealing with issues that I think even adults can relate to, and that might be why a lot of people really resonate with the show. And also, since she's crushing on this guy and she's trying to get close to this girl who ends up pretending to be this guy, and she doesn't know that, but there's some interpretations of that you can make for sure. Honestly, I didn't even know this going into the series, but Nobuko actually does sing about her feelings for Aiko in an insert song at one point that comes out in season 3. So that is a thing. It's very innocent. It's very chaste because they're like third, fourth graders, but it is definitely a thing. So that's one thing to be excited about. Overall, I think the show is worthy of its praise.
Yeah, I really don't I've not seen any of that depth in a show yet. Usually it was just Doremi wants steak. Doremi doesn't have steak. Doremi is sad, which, it can be fun, but it didn't involve me at the time. Back when I watched Doremi, I also wasn't into magical girl shows yet. I watched Doremi exclusively for Takuya Igarashi.
Yeah.
Which means now that I'm more into it, I will get back to the show at some point for sure.
I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
I did see that you dropped, unfortunately. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I'd like to hear you out. I did see that you dropped Sailor Moon on Analyst.
I just went through my on hold list and dropped most of that stuff that I don't see myself getting back to anytime soon. So that doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, but we did talk about why. You seem really invested in the manga, and a lot of the things that you like about the manga aren't really present in the anime.
Yeah.
So unless you decided you really wanted to see Igarashi and maybe even Sato's episodes, because I know about your complicated relationship with Ikuhara, so I won't push that. But yeah, they'll go into that. You don't worry, audience. You'll find out what that's about. But yeah, I get it. Sailor Moon was a show that I basically watched because I had never grown up with it, and I think I thought, well, maybe it deserved its classic status. But honestly, it has some problems to me, but I don't actually mind its formula so much, and I really enjoy the characters, and while it can be slow and sometimes a little inconsistent or a little too dabbling in tropes that I'm not all that big on, some of the character development is actually really strong, and the camaraderie between the characters is very convincing and very poignant, and the show is just, it's just funny. It's just hilarious sometimes. It's just, Doremi does the same thing because it's the same team, but the staff is just, they just go nuts. Like, they don't really care about, like, adhering too much to the manga, which I personally don't have a problem with because I'm actually not that big of a fan of the manga, but they just really just do whatever they want. And, sometimes they come up with something comedic, and sometimes they come up with something that really actually pulls at the heartstrings. And again, it's a seminal magical girl show because it is a kids series, but it also deals with a lot of adult themes. Not all of them are like done with like the most maturity, but some of them genuinely are poignant. Like, especially when the series, goes into the burden that these, sailor senshi, especially the younger they are, have. They're just kids. They're just, young teenagers, and they're destined to save the world and rewrite their past, and they just want to enjoy life and talk about boys, and maybe even crush on girls who they don't realize are girls because they think they're boys because they dress like boys because Tenno Haruka is the fucking best. But I digress. But yeah, like, at the same time, it is long, it is somewhat repetitive, and it can be a little like overbearing to people who just kind of want a narrative that gets to the point. So in that case, I definitely would recommend the manga, which Asuka seems to be really big on. I haven't read much of it like myself. Well, I've read like a good chunk of it, but there are ideas about Takeuchi Naoko's writing and concepts and the way that she draws her characters. I like some aspects of it, but there's something about the pacing and some of the shoujo tropes that just doesn't gel well with me. Yeah. So I have a tough time getting through it. And while the anime isn't like free of those, it does them in a way that's a little more inviting and a little more digestible. But generally speaking, I do like Sailor Moon a lot, and I do think it's worth watching. But if someone doesn't want to take the plunge with it, that's totally fine by me.
Even the manga isn't, like, as you mentioned, there are problems with Takeuchi's art style, with the writing and everything. Actually, I think her name was Minako, Sailor Venus. She and Usagi look way too often, way too similar. I have had so many points at which I was not sure who of the two is currently talking or present. Okay, and there's definitely problems. I think like the biggest reason to read Sailor Moon is just for how iconic and ground-setting it is for modern magical girl series. Precure wouldn't exist without Sailor Moon, and many other things wouldn't. So it is very interesting for that. Also, Sailor Pluto is just the best.
I think the last thing you mentioned before you cut out was Minako and Usagi look exactly the same at sometimes.
Yeah.
I do think the anime does fix this in a way because there's an interesting dynamic with them. They're not as close as they are in the manga. Like they're still best friends, like because they all are, but out of the entire like group of like 5, at least with the originals before the outer senshi and other characters come in, you have like the tight-knit group. Initially it starts out with the trio of Usagi, who's Sailor Moon, Mercury, who's Mizuno Ami. You have Ray, my favorite, who is the fiery psychic priestess who basically, she is in my opinion, she's the archetypal, like, sapphic magical girl tsundere. In a lot of ways, her interactions with Usagi are just like, look, you don't seem to be taking your job that seriously, and also, we're both really bad at social interactions, so I'm gonna yell at you sometimes, and you're gonna fight back, and we're gonna keep bickering, and people are gonna tell us, hey, could you go do that, somewhere else maybe, but only if this wasn't a kid's show. But they actually have a really solid and supportive relationship. And then you have Makoto, who's Sailor Jupiter, or Makoto comes in later, and she's basically the big sister of all of them. Like, even when Usagi and Rei are like, they think they're not hurting each other's feelings with some of the things they say and some of their little cat fights. At one point, she's like, okay, wait a minute. You guys are close, but maybe you could dial it down a bit. And she always hangs out with Ami, with Mercury, like always. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, they're always together. So yeah, eventually Minako, who's Sailor Venus, comes in, and she has a whole backstory of her own in the Codename Sailor V manga, which I still haven't read yet, but it's a 2-volume prequel that like began before the Sailor Moon manga did, and then ended like after, if I remember correctly. But basically, Minako is like tasked with finding the Moon Princess, and when she finds out that all of a sudden she'd been found and she's the only one who didn't know that, she inserts herself into the group pretty well. But generally speaking, one of the things that seems to change from the manga, as far as I can tell, is where Usagi she's a serious veteran warrior. And she's like, and Sailor B is like, the main, like, she's like the main hero that everyone looks up to in their world. Like, she's on video games. She's seen in the newspapers. Nobody knows who she is, but she is definitely the one that these Sailor Senshi want to be and want to meet. And when they finally do, and when she finally joins the team, they're just delighted. They love it. They just can't get enough of her. But Minako's thing is interesting because, as I said, in the anime, they definitely make her more distinguishable from Usagi. Of course, one of those reasons is Usagi has like lighter blonde hair, and Minako has like yellow blonde hair. Like she's definitely like much brighter. And then also her thing is Usagi really starts to like get a lot more serious and a lot better at reading the room and understanding the severity of situations, which ultimately means that Rei doesn't have to berate her over that in particular anymore. It's just routine for them to have those like little spats for the hell of it. I mean, it can get kind of annoying, but it's never abusive and genuinely like all in good fun. But when Minako, joins, that doesn't stop, but Usagi does get more serious, and she does get more devoted to her duty, especially as everyone finds out that she's the Moon Princess and that she has this whole destiny. But to compensate for that, what happens is that Minako herself, who has been the more serious one, starts to mellow out exponentially to the point that she essentially is the one doing all these silly, ridiculous things that Usagi was doing at the beginning of the series, and they basically switch roles in that way. And there's still jokes and obvious they are exactly the same person, or at least sisters separated at birth, which I guess might even technically be true given their past, but that's never gone into at all. No, it's definitely like Minako is the serious one, and then suddenly she's not, and then Usagi's the silly one, and suddenly she's not. And another thing that manga readers, don't like about the anime that much is because of that, Minako doesn't really like establish herself that well as the actual leader of the inner senshi that she's supposed to be. In the anime, that role is more for Usagi, obviously, but also more for Rei, who is like the one who's front and center in protecting her and like leading the senshi. So that's a change that some people like. Myself, I like it a lot, but there are other people who don't. And Minako is generally a good character in all adaptations. It's just the way she's done in the anime is just like, she's just one of those characters who you're like, okay, so she starts out, as like bullheaded one, and suddenly did she just ruin everything? But it's not that serious, bro. So Sailor Moon is definitely one of those things that's like seminal and groundbreaking for a reason. But as Asuka said, there are definitely decisions in both versions of the storyline that, are hit and miss, love it or hate it. You might choose one or over the other. So I don't think it's actually that accessible compared to more modern magical girl shows. which is not a take you would expect to hear from a magical girl podcast, but we're not like other magical girl podcasts, right, Asuka?
I mean, we can get into that more at a later point as well, because I agree that as accessible.
I mean, yeah. I don't even think it's just the length. I think it's just like you have to really like that Monster of the Day formula, and you have to really like the fact that some of the characters just act basically however the animators want them to. Like they're not always they're mostly consistent, but they're not always consistent. And then sometimes they're just consistent about being inconsistent.
Yes, that is a lot like some seasons of Precure.
Well, I'm glad to know that the Toei gods don't change in that regard. Even when they kicked Ikuhara and Sato out and like, hey Sato, we really liked your stuff. Can you come back and do a Precure season? But we'll only actually let you do some of it because we have this other director. But you can talk about that.
It's very bizarre how they got Junichi Sato for Precure and then he wasn't episode director on a single episode.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, he did some storyboards. Like, the problem with Precure credits is that I do not speak Japanese. I do not speak any Japanese. I can't read credits. So I go entirely off online sources. The main one, I know it's not always great, but ANN.
Yeah.
And ANN is very bad at Precure credits. Not in that they are wrong, but they are extremely incomplete. They often have just 10 episodes, maybe 20 credited at all.
Yeah.
Which is sad. From my experience, most of those are quite correct, just from the more popular ones, the ones I can recognize. If there's a Rie Matsumoto storyboarded and directed episode, I will recognize it. Same goes for Yuta Tanaka. And at some point, a bit even Akifumi Zako, who does Hugtto. You can feel it in Hugtto. It's very similar to Fresh, which is the show Akifumi Zako directed. But yeah, I'll have to actually look that up if I find better information.
That was the thing. That was the thing about Hugtto for me when I saw people going really crazy. I've known for a very long time basically the gist of each Precure season, what the plot is, what the stakes are, what some of the characters are like, because of my friends who would always post about it. So I'm the least as an individual, spoilers never bother me, and a lot of the time I just read and get myself exposed to so many titles before I actually experience them myself. So spoilers rarely bother me, especially for a show like Precure where nothing is permanent. Not that I'm saying that as a bad thing, but in the case of Fresh, I found out about what happens to Setsuna, and I won't spoil that for anyone who doesn't know. But when I saw what was happening to Ruru and how similar it was, I wondered if you were going to comment on that. And I was also thinking, well, yes, I do like this concept. I would do like the story arc because it always leads to the villain is trying to break free of their masters and she's trying to do the right thing. And then, she gets really screwed up by the situation and the heroines who are trying to help her are realizing, oh, she's being treated awfully. We need to save her. And it's against, all of this is happening against her will. Once they, save her after a fake out or two that, makes everyone cry, she somewhat reincarnates, I guess. And, they sort of have to make up for their villainy, but it doesn't really seem like something that's touched on too much. But anyway, when Hugtto did that, I was like, yeah, I see why that impresses people. But I knew that Asuka would probably say, oh, this is just Fresh again. And to me, my mindset is, I don't mind that. I think that both are probably really strong and good. But if I was to go back to any show at this point, it would probably be Fresh because Fresh did it first.
Other shows that we shouldn't talk about that much right now because we've both seen at least a lot of them, and we can definitely do full seasons are Symphogear, Fate Colored Liner Prisma Ilia, and Nanoha, I guess. Whereas in Nanoha, I'm currently watching the third season. Those are all shows we don't really need to comment on right now because we've both seen them, right?
All right, so yeah, I've seen all of Collide. I actually haven't seen that much Nanoha, to be honest. With Nanoha, again, same friend who was really into Precure. I learned everything about Nanoha from him. I actually tried to watch the first episode in 2014. I was the dove though on the copy on that I torrented it. Wasn't bad, but it wasn't what I wanted to stick with. But he told me that season 1 was a little slow. Even though I later found out that it had Shimbo Akiyuki actually directing it.
It is Akiyuki Shinbo, yes.
And this is was his actual, he was actually directing it. He wasn't just supervising it, before he sold his soul to the Aniplex devils and Shaft and saved the studio and made it what it is today, for better or worse. His direction, I honestly really enjoy. His actual, hands-on crafting of a narrative, I'm actually really, really excited about. So I did generally enjoy Nanoha Season 1, but I did find it very hard to get through at first because it is a little slow. So I actually did watch the first movie and then the second one as well. Movie first and second A's. And I really enjoyed those films. And I found out they're not actually just compilations, they're actually alternate retellings. Because according to the audio commentary, they're actually documentaries about Nanoha and Fate and how they join the Time-Space Administration Bureau and become some of its top employees / executives. And they're basically films that sort of kind of whitewash the TSAB's involvement in in certain scandals in the Nanoha-verse. So they're semi-autobiographies / propaganda films that exist in universe, and they were made during the Strikers timeline. So that was a really interesting tidbit that definitely made me want to go actually see the TV series in its entirety. And ultimately, despite that, I still haven't watched that much. I've still only watched the first season. I haven't touched A's, and I've seen a little bit of Strikers, probably not much more than Asuka has. So I definitely need to get back to that franchise, but
I mean, especially now that 2 years after watching the original series and Ace, I am finally getting to Strikers, and I am noticing that it is a very good show.
Yeah.
I barely remember what happened in the first 2 seasons, outside the big plot. Episode to episode, I can't tell you what happened, but I remember it is just very solid. I remember it very fondly.
Yeah. Oh, I also forgot to mention I did actually see the third movie, Reflection, which is based off of the PSP games Gears of Destiny and Battle of Aces. And I thought it was okay. I didn't like it as much as 2 films or even the first season. I thought that it was kind of just a straightforward action movie, and the plot kind of irked me. I've actually found out that the writer of Symphogear is a big fan of Nanoha, and that's not really surprising. He's very good friends with Suzuki Masaki, who is a huge fan of Wild Arms, the video game series that Kaneko Akifumi did before he wrote Symphogear. And so he actually wrote on the scenario of the original games. So the Reflection film to me, kind of reminded me of, Symphogear in a way that wasn't as enjoyable, and it wasn't as enjoyable as the rest of Nanoha that I had seen. But it was still a decent, fun flick, and I do still need to see the 4th movie that continues its storyline, Detonation, but I'll get to that eventually. But Nanoha is a good series, and I'm glad that Asuka's going through it, because there's definitely a lot to talk about there, but we both need to, get a little further in it before we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely talk at least one episode about Magica in the future.
Yeah. I am a lifelong fan of Magica. Sort of sometimes it really just isn't that fun to watch or isn't that fun to talk about, but I still love it. I swear by the movies. I'm greatly enjoying the Magia record TV anime that's out right now. That's the only other magical show that I'm watching at the moment, aside from Ojamajo Doremi. And I think it's great. I don't have much frame of reference about how it's different from the mobile game, but I'm going to start playing it eventually because we won't see it again until the fall. and Shaft is going to do another magical girl-esque looking series that might be made to sell toys with Saeki Shouji, who is probably one of the most solid Shaft and Gainax directors and storyboarders, in my opinion. I really like his work, although he's had some real misses. But in generally speaking, I like his work on stuff like Strike Witches. His episodes of Review Starlight were absolutely fantastic. So I'm very excited to see him on this Assault Lily Bouquet show that's coming out. And I'm very excited for Shaft in general to be doing more productions that seem more on the healthy side.
Shouji Saeki is the perfect segue into another Magical Girl show I've seen, Wish Upon the Pleiades, which I know you haven't seen.
I've seen 2 episodes of it.
Okay. I expect you to like it, and I expect us to have a very heated debate about it.
I actually know about a lot of this, and I'm kind of interested in it for that, and I'm also interested in it because Chase says it's a genuinely good show, and it's one of the last good shows that Gainax has done.
I disagree.
But I would like to hear your thoughts on it. I don't know how I would agree on it, but I think the concept of the series is genuinely interesting.
Yeah, I cannot stand it. So I'm looking forward to you watching that. And I guess finally, my personal favorite Magical Girl show is, well, there's 2 shows, one of which is my favorite, that are apparently not 100% seen as Magical Girl shows. At least AniList doesn't list them as such. One is Kill la Kill.
Yes. I'm a huge fan of Kill la Kill. Before I discovered Symphogear and Yuuki Yuuna, I was really big into Kill la Kill, and I was nigh obsessed with it. And I was just thinking about it lately. I was just thinking about how fun and how in depth I went with some of learning all of its influences and trying to catch all the pop culture references and just thinking about everything it had to say. I just really loved that show, and I really feel like rewatching it. But I have my Blu-rays in storage. I could watch it on Netflix and Hulu. I can wait, I guess, but maybe I won't. But yeah, Kill la Kill, I love that show, and I'm glad to. I know that I've known that Asuka does too, so I would definitely consider it a Magical Girl show, but we can discuss that at some point later.
The other one I don't understand, people arguing about it at all, is Vividred Operation. It's not a popular show, but it is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, no, that's by the Strike Witches director Takamura Kazuhiro. I'm a big fan of his work overall too. Really like his style. I think his character designs, based off of Shimada Himikane's, are very good. And Vividred Operation is definitely that one other show he did that I haven't seen. I know it's very fan servicey, but I really, really want to watch it. So I'm actually surprised that Asuka likes it that much, because I thought they were going to say that Black Rock Shooter is their favorite Magical Girl series.
It would be. I am not entirely sure if I see Black Rock Shooter as a Magical Girl series. I was thinking about it, and I understand why you would say it. It's just, if Black Rock Shooter is Magical Girl, then it is definitely my favorite Magical Girl.
I used to be big into Black Rock Shooter myself. I really did enjoy the TV show, and it was interesting to find out that it was one of the early projects for Trigger as well. You have Imaishi and Amamiya and Akira and a bunch of other Trigger staff on the episodes, and I was quite surprised to learn that, because I didn't know that before when I watched it. I generally speaking have a good feeling about Okada Mari's writing so far. I enjoy it. I mean, I've yet to come across shows of hers that are polarizing and that people really don't like and have problems with them myself. But I enjoy Black Rock Shooter quite a bit, and I used to be into it. And I thought about rewatch, and I've met a lot of other people who are into it, which I was surprised about because it's super niche. And unfortunately, I haven't rewatched it because, every time I try to, I just end up watching the OVA instead, which is not as good, but I don't know. I guess it's easier to watch for me, a 50-minute OVA with mostly fighting scenes over an 8-episode psychological drama, which can get like really wild and trippy sometimes, and just generally like distressing as well. But it is a pretty good show. I couldn't help but notice that when Okada wrote like Selector, Infected, and Spread Recross, which are a friend of Asuka's. I'm not that close to her myself, but a friend of Asuka's really likes that show like a lot. And We Cross is something that I was into for while it aired, and I was probably into it around until the movie Selector Destructed came out, and I really liked that film. But then I fell off of it because I watched an episode of the Lost Storage series. I was kind of interested in it, but there were other things during that fall season, 2016, that I was more interested in watching instead. And then I heard that it wasn't that great, and some people just absolutely didn't like it compared to the originals, so I kind of stayed away from it. But I might watch them eventually, especially since they do an Avengers, Infinity War sort of thing in the second season, conflated, and I do miss the original cast, and I do want to see them. And they just recently announced a new We Cross anime, because the trading card game isn't going anywhere soon, and I don't know if I'll watch it, but it's interesting that the franchise is still around. But card games be that way. And also, debating on whether that one is a magical series isn't really that interesting to me, but we could, I guess.
Yeah, that's another one where does that count? And I was like, whatever, honestly. Like.
And speaking of fall 2016 shows that I was really into that have magical girls as a definite component, well, there was Brave Witches, which is the show that's in between the first 2 seasons of Strike Witches. I really liked those first 2 seasons. I'm especially a huge fan of the movie and the OVAs that came afterwards. I'm a big fan of that series in general, and I was into that around the same time that I got into Yuuna, and sort of fell off of it again when I got into like Symphogear and Love Live that same year in late 2015. But I really liked Strike Witches, and season 3 is supposed to be coming out this year, so I was very excited for it. But Brave Witches, generally speaking, I liked. I didn't really think it had this charm as the original series, but I might have just been a little too harsh on it. It was very easy with the new cast, who I did enjoy, to compare it to Love Live Sunshine. And I do think that it does have some of the same problems, but I think that really just has more to do with my attachment to the original Strike Witches narrative and the fact that it was like kind of retroactively placed in between. But I generally enjoyed that, and it wasn't a total disappointment. And I am excited for season 3 and the new Idol Witches show that's actually going to be coming out at sometime next year that Saeki Shouji is also working on.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And then on top of that, there was Shimatsu no Izeta, which I really wanted to like that show too, but actually same writer as, same writers, a bunch of things, Code Geass, sort of worked on Code Geass, worked on Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress, worked on Guilty Crown. I think he also worked on Valvrave, and then he did like a Legend of the Galactic Heroes movie way back. But Yoshino, and he worked on Mahime, which is a show I could certainly talk Asuka's face off about, because I have mixed feelings on that one as well. But Yoshino Hiroyuki, he also worked on Vividred Operation, and that seems to be like one of his better. And Macross Frontier, but yeah. So Vividred actually seems to be one of his better shows in that way. But I did not like. Sadly, I did not like Izetta the Last Switch. I felt like I could go into it, but there were a lot of things about it that I just found like rather disappointing. So out of all the fall 2016 anime, Magical Girl anime, that was one that fell on the low side. There was also Magical Girl Raising Project, which I don't actually dislike it, but mostly because I watched 2 episodes of the anime and then I ended up reading the novel. And I might go back to it because I did relatively enjoy the novel, and I've heard that the other novels get more interesting with the settings and the powers, and the general storyline gets a lot better. But that's a polarizing series in the magical girl fandom that I found myself enjoying, even though I won't like sing its praises yet. But I didn't watch the anime. I mean, the I don't know if it was the OP or ED with Nano. Dreamcatcher is a real bop. And I was happy that I got to see her in New York at the Anisong World Matsuri 2 years ago. I didn't actually meet her in person, but seeing her live stage, that was really cool. She has a great voice and good English too. Not that that really matters. Yeah, MGRP is fine. Racing Project's fine, in my opinion. I can talk about it at a future date. But putting that aside, now you read to the Magical Girl show, which I really loved in 2016 and still cannot stop thinking about, and that is Flip Flappers. That some of you may already be familiar with it and already may be fans of it, either because you like its animation, you like its characters, you like just everything or anything about it. Asuka seems to have not been that taken with it, from what I could tell. And that is unfortunate, though I would be curious to hear why that is. But Flip Floppers is definitely one of my favorite Magical Girl series for sure, that I would definitely love to talk about as best as I can at some point on this podcast. And then other than that, I would say the other big magical show that I was into for a time was Cutie Honey, which Asuka and I do like. It's a 3-episode OVA by Gainax for the Cutie Honey franchise's 30th anniversary, and I don't know what else to say about it. It's really good in my opinion. It's a lot of fun. And I know Asuka really likes it too, but they like the live-action movie by Ano Hideaki, the director of Neon Genesis Evangelion and Kare Kano, a lot more.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the live-action movie too, but I want to hear them talk about it a bit.
Yeah, there's... technically I like Cutie Honey as well. The problem is it's 50-minute episodes, and I do not have that much attention to spare. So I've been sitting on it for a few years, and at some point I will continue, because Cutie Honey is really good, and I'm currently reading the original Cutie Honey manga.
Yeah. So you only saw the first episode? Yeah, so first episode's really solid because I don't know how many of you know about the Cutie Honey storyline, but it's kind of iconic in anime. It's about this girl with a genius, mad scientist father who, she basically thinks that, he's so focused in his work, that he's neglecting me, and then he ends up getting killed, and she finds out that she's an android with the ability to materialize whatever she wants, especially, change her appearance. And she uses that power to go find out who killed her dad. And if this is sounding familiar, that's largely because Cutie Honey is an extremely apparent inspiration on Kill la Kill. But to drive that point home further, the first episode of Cutie Honey, which Asuka has seen, is also directed by Imeishi, and the whole 3-episode series with Ano, his chief director, is written by Nakashima Kazuki. So it is very hard for me not to see Cutie Honey as a precursor to Kill la Kill and many other trigger shows. To be honest, it pretty much is.
Yeah.
So that connection does exist in a lot of ways. And then as far as other magical girl series go, I kind of feel like I've talked about most of them. There was this other one. I haven't gotten to the main one that we mentioned earlier, but I just seem to generally like a lot of the Magical Girl series outside of Precure that came after Madoka Magica, which is just seen as like a controversial take because many of them are just suggested to be too edgy or too derivative, and I don't exactly disagree with that sometimes, but I'd argue the problem with those shows, except for the ones that are genuinely good, which at this point we might have to get into in a future podcast. The problem with those shows that they mention and refer to, like Mahou Shoujo Site and Daybreak Illusion and Magical Girl Racing Project even, and Magical Girl Spec Ops Asuka, is they go so hard with the edge and the despair at the beginning of the show that it is kind of hard to feel like they actually understand what made Madoka a success, or they just want to capitalize off of the fact that Madoka sort of blackened the Magical Girl name, which is also a take that I will discuss in great detail. I really vehemently disagree with. But I think also at the same time, it's not really fair to look at those works as, they're just capitalizing off of a trend of, making girls suffer for trying to do the right thing. No, I think with certain series like Sight and with Spec Ops Asuka, although, I actually do hear Sight gets better, but its content is a little too much for me to actually, check out the manga, since the anime is definitely not that good. Clearly didn't get to the parts of the manga that people actually like. I think it just starts out too edgy, too dark, and not totally balanced, not showing the hope spots enough that can get people to still care and keep watching. I think that's something that it didn't take from Madoka as well, and I would argue that's because, to be honest, these writers really just seem to want to do their own edgy story and insert magical girls into it. I don't think it's as deep or complex as, they literally just wanted to cash off of Madoka's success. And I think that's just the wrong way to look at it entirely. But then there were shows that have been unfairly grouped into this category, and I'm not a fan of that. One of those was the year after Madoka. I mean, even Symphogear was freaking called, a Madoka ripoff at some point. It's a really ridiculous trend, and I don't even see how they could think that. But I don't think I really want to discuss that right now, and that's old news, and people haven't had that take since season 1. But the first, I'd say, post-Madoka Magical Girl show that didn't make waves, but people still talked about it as starting a trend, was Daybreak Illusion, which I, generally speaking, actually liked quite a lot. I wouldn't say I'm hugely attached to it, despite the fact that it does hold a record for probably the most amount of episodes I've ugly cried at anything ever. Either that or Raycon. But yeah, Daybreak genuinely, I think it was a little too ambitious, was a little too dark at the beginning. And the production was definitely, something, and it was trying to be this Evangelion type plot, which I'm so sick of, but I thought Daybreak did it okay, and then it became Gurren Lagann at the end, and I was like, well, it's definitely not a Madoka clone, because a lot of the ways that this show did its emotions and did its character arcs, I actually think were a lot stronger in some aspects to Madoka. For reasons I could get into eventually, even though Madoka is still my favorite, obviously, it still is the one that I would definitely say, I like this a lot better than. But that's more because of my attachment to the characters rather than the overall quality at this point. But yeah, I think Daybreak is an interesting, if flawed, show that didn't really deserve to get thrown under the bus. And then last but not least, the show that, again, we might not be able to get to today, but happened a year after Daybreak Illusion, that everyone called a Madoka clone, is Yuki Yuuna wa Yusha de Aru, or Yuki Yuuna is a hero. And Asuka just, as they said, finished the first season, and I don't know if we'll have enough time to talk about it in depth today.
No. We definitely won't get to it today. I do have to say that I agree that Yuki Yuuna is taking things from Madoka for sure, but in a way that isn't just, oh yeah, we want to capitalize on Madoka without understanding it. It definitely takes inspiration from it.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I would agree, and to state that take with some context, the creators were definitely aware of this. They were definitely aware of trying not to do the same things as Madoka, because if you all remember the Toquake and how it affected the broadcast of the last 2 episodes of Madoka to the point that they had to change the fight Homer had with Walpurgisnacht so that it had fire instead of water, and then those last 2 episodes didn't actually premiere until Good Sunday, a month later, which is just actually perfect, but I wasn't around for that time.
Yeah, neither was I.
After Tohoku, Japan went through a very interesting cultural shift that I'm not sure if it's stuck, but they did become a little less individualistic and a little less community-oriented as they were helping to rebuild the country, and that was a sharp contrast from some of the attitudes of their society and of their economic system from the days of the bubble economy and the days, well, I think they're still in the bubble economy, but the days of the bubble economy, it was blowing up and bursting, or just kind of, not just staying stagnant. And the days of the lost decade and the terrorist attacks in 1995 by Onshin Raku, Tohoku is a very different, kind of situation. And Tohoku actually did inspire the creators of Yuki Yuuna the most. And in regards to, because they really just wanted to make a show with magical girls, doing a lot of badass things in a society that had kind of sort of gone back in time but stayed exactly the same at the same time, and they wanted to reflect the whole community and just helping and reaching out and being an everyday hero, without having any magnitude of destiny like behind it. That they wanted to reflect in the magical show what it was like to live in Japan, during the relief effort. And at the same time, they also did know that with Manga, they being around, they were going to have some difficulty deciding on, what exactly should we make this show relative to other magical girl series. And that's why in Yuki Yuuna, they don't die in the first season at all. And I think the reason that works is because of the subversion that the series creates. Being that you will go through an episode of it thinking, oh, someone's going to die, because there's always a death or two, because it's a post-Madoka magical girl show, and there's always a death or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And for me and for other people watching the show who did end up enjoying it and did end up not tossing it aside for some reason, which we can get into later, the thing that was interesting to me is just how, that was an exhilarating experience, and that was a sort of, I expected something bad to happen every single time, and when it didn't, I was relieved, but I was also very surprised. And after the surprise wore off, I was like, okay, well, I'll just enjoy them, going around living their daily mundane lives with care in the world, because they don't have to fight at this current moment right now, or maybe again at all for a while. And then when something I wanted good to happen, no, that's when they decide, okay, we're not going to kill anyone, but we are going to make it so that this system is pretty fucked up. Like, we can go into that, and I don't want to give spoilers. But interestingly about that is Yuki Yuuna is a hero, or Wayusha Dearu actually started off as a multimedia project in earlier in the year that it came out. The anime came out in October 2014 on the 17th, like 2 weeks after the broadcasts of the fall 2014 season began. So it was very late. The first 2 episodes aired back to back, but the franchise actually started 6 months earlier in April as a light novel that was published in Dengeki magazine, Washiosumi Wayusha Dearu, which was basically the prototype for the entire series. And it was the story of how Wasumi, the main hero, ended up becoming Togo Mimori in Yuki Yuuna as a hero. So, and what's interesting about this is, as the novel was going on, people were like sort of aware of the true nature of the world and they weren't aware of the true nature of the world, but they were probably just reading it like straight without like really thinking too much about it. And once you hit a certain point where deaths do happen, it definitely changes things a lot. The way the series is going, because it is a very intense and unprecedented moment. And then you would have, around the time that the anime started airing, have the final chapter coming out, and you would be learning more about the world for the anime, honestly, than you ever really did in the reading the novel, which wasn't available to English Western readers, since I don't think the fan translation was even done by that time. But once the final but here's what's really interesting about it. If nobody dies in season 1, what's even wilder to me, and I kind of wish I got to take part in this experience, is you already know like how like dark and dire things get in Washiosumi if you're reading it, and then you're watching the anime and you're wondering, well, what happened to these characters? And when the episode 8, which is the episode that just basically changes everything about the series and made pre-orders of its Blu-rays like skyrocket, really that's when the series started to become quite profitable and quite steadily growing in popularity, if modest, franchise in Japan, with a whole slew of visual novels to be packed with the Blu-rays, and you had a PS Vita game, which was short-lived, and a bunch of 4-koma manga, and the light novel itself, of course, the Washiosumi light novel, of course, itself, and many later ones, which I'll talk about at some point. But once you got to that point where the anime met up with the prequel novel and just the prequel novel ended, that episode hits. And it's like you actually see the aftermath before novel readers did. Because the last chapter of Washiosumi did not come out until 4 days after episode 8 aired. You really don't actually... So you're constantly wondering while you're watching it, like, if they're not going to die, what's going to be the big twist? And I won't go into details about what it is right now, but once you actually have read this novel, either while it was publishing or after the fact for most people, once you had read this novel, you realized that these Dengeki G readers who might have also been watching they were wondering, well, what the fuck? We don't know the answer to this either. And then suddenly they see the aftermath. They see what happened to their favorite characters that they had been following for 6 months. And it just really changes everything when they finally find out the details after the fact. And I just really honestly love the way that the series is constructed in that way. And it continues on with that pattern even after season 1. But that is something that is putting it into a perspective that really changes how you look at the show, I think. And I wanted Asuka to know about that, to start off. But I was glad to find out that they genuinely enjoyed season 1, especially since the music, which is definitely something that pulls people in, is done by the Nier and Drakengard.
Oh, yeah.
We have Studio Monaka, which is led by Okabe Keiichi and other composers, even Kosaki Satoru, who worked on the Monogatari series, and Haruhi Suzumiya and Lucky Star, and a bunch of others. So they worked on the Nier and Dragon games, and they composed the soundtrack to Yuki Yuuna. So many of the times in the Naruto series, you're absolutely going to hear Nier music. And if you really like that series, if you really like Yoko Taro's games, then you will at least enjoy the music to Yuki Yuuna for sure.
I mean, there's an interesting thing in that I do assume that for Yuki Yuuna, it's not just him, but like Monaka as an entirety, because the music is not just Nier.
No, it definitely. There's a lot of that each do their own individual track, and actually, unless I counted it wrong, Okabe does some of the more iconic tracks in the series, but he doesn't actually do that many of them overall. He kind of lets his co-composers like Hoashi Keigo work on it, and you have you definitely have Emi Evans on some songs, especially Usuyuki. So I keep forgetting the name, but it's a track called Snowflower. It's a very somber piece that plays during the very dramatic and solemn parts of the show, and that has Okabe and Emi Evans. But then you also have other vocalists like I think Namikawa. Mami is her name. But yeah, so there's a lot of people working on the Yuki Yuuna soundtrack, but Okabe is definitely the main person behind it. And on top of that, well, we have to wrap up soon, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention on that. Oh no.
We'll talk about it like properly next time.
For sure. I was just very glad that Asuka ended up watching it and not overlooked, because it's I wouldn't say it's a perfect show, but it does resonate with me deeply. The cast is probably one of the most like relatable and probably the most emotionally affecting that I've ever come across. They're just really very important to me overall. And I really love the world and the structure of the series. I mean, it might not be for everyone, but I think as far as magical girl shows go, wow, I love a lot of them. Yuki Yuuna is definitely the one that's like nearest and dearest to my heart, along with also Precure, but we don't really want to talk too much about that in this podcast.
Yes.
But we could at some.
We definitely can, but that is for another time, because now I think we should wrap up.
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. But this is our first Mahou Showtime podcast. I'd say I'm feeling pretty good about it. How about you, Asuka?
It's way longer than I had hoped for, but that's okay. That is not a problem.
It's an introductory podcast, and I will have to so I will keep that in mind for next time. All right, should we sign off now?
Yes, exactly. Please subscribe and share us. Please be nice to us. Please make us popular.
Yes.
No, actually, it doesn't matter. But if you got this far, thank you very much. And hopefully hear you next time.
Thank you. Bye.